People of the world, welcome back to Send It Rising Live. You know that I don't believe in coincidences. I think they're stupid. Seems as though randomness is everywhere. You know what's going to happen today, listeners. You know when I talk about coincidences and the gravity of our relationships, that we find ourselves as humans connecting with other people in what seems like total chaos. Why are we talking to the people that we're talking to? I don't know. Maybe we have some sort of thread in common. And yet, if you open your ears and your heart and your mind, you find that the people that enter into your life, if you're prepared to love them and care about them, deliver like Santa Claus endless gifts, jewels, nuggets of wisdom, dare I say. And so let me tell you, in the brief conversation I had with our guest backstage, I know that he's going to deliver some very, very interesting anecdotes about what it's like to be an attorney, what it's like to be an author, to put food on people's tables. These are not easy things to do, ladies and gentlemen. And when you look at someone like our guest today from the outside, you might go, it's easy for him. He's rich, successful, he's got everything you could possibly ever want. But yeah, there's a price to pay. There's always a price to pay. Ladies and gentlemen, you're in for a real treat. Our guest today, the one, the only, Corey Kupfer.
Thanks, Kellen. It's great to be here.
Great to have you. So you were sharing a little bit of a very interesting anecdote backstage that I want you to elaborate on. Let's dive right into it.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, listen, the way you set it up with me is right. I mean, listen, I've got this successful law firm. I got, top podcast. I got a book out. I do public speaking, whatever. It may seem like, not only is my life great now, but it's always been great. And I've had no struggles, no, issues, whatever. And listen, that's not true for me. And frankly, that's not true for everybody. I mean, I'll just say real quickly before I get into my particular story, I'm a member of Entrepreneurs Organization, which is a global organization of business owners who have $1 million plus in revenue, right? So you think, oh, wow, they're doing great. We did a thing one time called Night of the Living Dead, where every single person shared their story, not like the hero's journey, like, oh yeah, I had this tough time and now, and I got over it in 3 minutes, everything's great. Like the real stuff, right? The bankruptcies, the divorces, so in any case, when I share my particular story, or this one of my stories, I want the listeners to understand that I'm not the exception here, right? I'm the rule, no matter, with every successful person. So this takes us back to the Great Recession, right? For me, 2008 was still okay, but 2009, into 10, really 2009 was the year was. And so, I'm running a corporate deal law firm. I'm 25 years roughly into it. I'm pretty set, right? Got a good set of clients. Things are going well. I've got a few bucks in the bank. I have a lake house, up in the country where I get to go on the weekends. It seems like everything's great. Well, we all know a lot of people got crushed during the Great Recession. For me, I mean, I'm a corporate deal lawyer, right? So there's no deals going on. Money's dried up. I got clients going out of business. I got clients who are in business but can't afford to pay me the money they owe me. I didn't react quick enough, like a lot of people didn't, whether it's lay people off or cut expenses, whatever, because you have a down month, you have another down month, you don't know how long it's going to last. The next thing I know, I'm $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a month down in revenue. And that goes quick. I had just, a year before that, I had built out a new office. I had $150,000 line of credit we pulled down to build that out. I'm not sitting with millions of dollars in the bank at that point, right? So next thing I know, I'm $325,000 in debt. I couldn't afford to keep my office and my apartment at the time. I actually gave up my apartment. We fortunately had a shower in the office. So I got an air mattress and I was sleeping on the air mattress in my glass front office in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. Just getting up early enough so when my employees came in, I was showered and they didn't see me sleeping on my air mattress. I had creditors calling me every day. I didn't know how I was going to make payroll. My lake house was underwater, not physically, but financially. I had pulled out some money on a HELOC from it. So now it was $50,000, $60,000 worth less than the money I owed on it. And I was like, what am I going to do? I mean, I don't, how am I in this position at this point in my career? I thought it was going to be smooth sailing from there. I had struggles earlier, where I had been in debt and built it up from nothing, all this stuff and stories. But I thought by the time I got to that stage, I'd be set. But that's not the reality of life. It's not the reality of the entrepreneurial journey. So I could talk a little bit about, specifically, what I did. I actually tell this story in my Authentic Negotiating book. But I think the first message I really want people to understand is that, one, if it were easy, everybody would do it, and two, when it looks easy, it pretty much, never, has been. Everybody's been through something.
Yeah, there's a Duncan Trussell, total hippie drug dude, big into like 60s spirituality. Like, love this guy. He's got a very famous podcast. He says that suffering is like being born as a dolphin and the water is suffering. Like, it's just that's the human experience. You're not, there's no, I don't care who you are, where you're from, what language you speak, how tall you are. I mean, just insert all the variables of humanity. It's just welcome to the suffering party. And we learn so much from that suffering. It's like I remember being a teacher and just having some students where I was so nice when I started because I thought in my dumb, ignorant, 23-year-old head that, oh, like all these teachers I've had all these years, I can do better than them. And then you're standing in front of this group of students and you're super nice. And then they just run over you and there's no discipline and it's just a giant nightmare. And then it slowly dawns on you that the teachers you had actually knew what they were doing and that you got to get a little bit of an edge to you.
Yeah. And listen, I mean, it's, I sort of said a cliche phrase and maybe said it as a little joke, if it were easy, everybody would do it. But that's the truth. I mean, listen, there's a reason why only certain people are entrepreneurs or have certain level of achievement, whatever. And, it's because it's hard. And especially, frankly, when you're somebody who's committed to doing it with integrity and doing it with, not, yes, I agree with you. Sometimes you need an edge, right? And you can't be a pushover. But at the same time, there are people who go to the other extreme, right, and are turn out to be, jerks and assholes and not, not in integrity and take advantage of people or whatever. And that, one, is not in alignment with my values, and second of all, that's going to come back to haunt you anyway. It does catch up with you. So that balance between, just doing what it takes to fight through, but also doing it with integrity, and that was a big, thing I had back in that example, because a lot of my friends were telling me to declare bankruptcy or to short sale my house, up at the lake or whatever, or, half of my debt was corporate. I could have bankrupted the company and not bankrupted myself and paid half back. And I always say that I don't judge other people who make a different decision that they think is best for their family and their lives. But for me, I'm a big believer in that the internal body of work and everything we do. I talk about it in my negotiating book. I talk about it in life. Like, if we're not aligned internally, right? If we're not self-aware enough to know what is true for us and what is important to us and what our values are and what's in alignment with those values and what's not, that's when we run into trouble in life. And fortunately, the one thing I did have back then was that I had done a lot of work on myself. I'd done a lot of personal growth work and business growth work and internal introspection and spiritual work and all this stuff. And and I think that's the single biggest thing you can do as an entrepreneur, because I think your business success is limited by your own personal growth. So I had some tools, and even though there was a point at which I was totally in the weeds, like, just dealing with their next creditor call and trying to figure out what was going on and whatever, and I couldn't see the trees, I did, the forest for the trees, I did at some point step back, and I actually went up to that lake house, which was which again was in financial trouble, but a beautiful spot to get away and quiet. And I did some visioning and planning work, and I really looked what was integrity for me, not for anybody else, but for me. And I realized for me, declaring bankruptcy or, not paying back any of the debts, even though legally I could, was not in alignment for me. I had made those commitments. It was my word, my reputation, but even more so than the external part of that, it was my own, who I am. I believe in keeping your word, right? You make a commitment, you keep your word. That's just a fundamental belief of mine. And I think that's part of what is authentic to me, what is integrity for me. So I came back from that retreat deciding I was going to pay back every single penny of that $325,000. And I put together, I used a tool that I teach in my authentic negotiating book to help me vision and plan this out. And really what I decided was I'm going to return every creditor's call. Like, most people will hide, even people who owed me money, for like good clients of mine, where, people tend to avoid, they tend to hide out when things get tough. I returned every creditor call. I was open and honest with them. I told them I was going to pay them. They demanded $18,000 tomorrow. I said, I'm sending you $50 and I'm going to send you $50 a week. And they were like, that's not enough. And I'm like, well, that's what I can do, because I looked at the total per month I could spend. I divided it up amongst all the creditors proportionally to what I owed them. And I figured, listen, even if they say they're not going to take it, I'm going to send the money. Right. And, fortunately for me, I think practically there were so many other people who were running and hiding and avoiding that when they got that $50 check from me, even though it wasn't close to what they wanted, they're like, oh, well, at least this guy's in communication and he's paying. We'll go chase these other people. Right. And then as, of course, things got better, I was able to, pay down more and more. And I ended up paying down the debt over a 4-year period while also being able to put money away in my retirement account and that kind of stuff. But more importantly than all that, I think what got me out of that and not only kept my reputation, but actually enhanced it so that when things started to turn around, we actually did do, like even better than we had done in the past, was because I made some decisions that were in alignment with my values, and people saw that. And, and those are the toughest ones, right? Because many people would make a different decision. They're encouraging you to make a different decision. Legally, you're allowed, there's nothing, you're allowed to declare bankruptcy. You're allowed to short sale a house. But for me, it's about that alignment with my inner truth. And I trusted that. And, and I ended up, again, I don't want to, it's easy to focus on the hero's journey part, and I don't want to make it sound like that was an easy decision. That was a hard decision. It was very, very tempting to relieve that pressure. But I made the decision I made, and I'm grateful that I did, because it's, we're now, what is it now? Wow. 15 years, 14 years, 13 years later. And my life is so much better. And I think it would have been very, very different if I had taken a different course back then.
The name of the show is called Send It Rising, because I tried to articulate what you just said in a variety of ways, which is, I can't tell you that your spiritual journey and how successful you will be are directly correlated, that they cause one another, unless I can only tell it through stories.
Yeah.
Because it's true. And it's like, on the one hand, this whole law of attraction, envision what you want for the future, is total bogus nonsense, because not everyone's going to be president in the United States. You can have 500,000 people all sit there and just meditate and envision being the president, and they're not going to be, because there's just one. So there's that, but yet it totally works, right? 100%. I've 1.5 million examples where, like, even the house I'm in right now, I'm like, whoa, like what? But I went through some deep, dark, sad depression, like horrifying sadness, like really, really rough stuff to land here. So it's, it's like the universe will exact its toll. You want it. It's like, okay, no problem. It's like, this is what it costs.
Yeah. And listen, I think it brings us all lessons. And if we're self-aware enough and willing to do the work and go through the pain, we learn those lessons, get to the other side. I believe, I say this all the time, universe, if you don't get the lesson, it's going to come, at first the universe taps you on the shoulder a little bit, and then it gives you a little push, and then they'll knock you down. And with some people in certain situations, it'll eventually kill you if you haven't gotten the lesson, right? That's what happens. That's my belief. So, I work to try to get the lesson. I'm not always successful, but I work to try to get the lesson as early as I can in that process, at the tap point. Sometimes I don't, but listen, I believe like you do. I love, one of my mentors is Bob Proctor, who passed away recently, and love Bob. And if anybody, the conversation of paradigms and what holds things in place in the subconscious mind, Bob, like, there's nobody who understands that the way Bob did. He's got all kinds of materials out, but what Bob used to say with the law of attraction, which I love, and he was in The Secret, and The Secret's been much maligned, again, for sometimes good reasons, because it could seem to oversimplify what it is. But what Bob used to say, which I really believe, is that the law of attraction is really based upon the law of vibration, right? So it's not just, oh, what you think about comes about. No, it's when you're talking about the vibration you're in, you're talking about that deep inner work you need to do, right? Yes, you can do affirmations, things like that help you. They're a tool, but they're not enough. You have to actually align. It was like I was talking about in my example, where I did the inner work to make sure I took actions that were aligned with my inner truth. That's a deep, difficult journey. That's what Bob's talking about. When you do that and you get in that vibration, that's when the attraction comes. So it's way, way deeper than just thinking about something. Oh, I want to be president of the United States. I'm going to be president of the United States tomorrow. No. You want to get deeply aligned with what is true for you and what you're drawn to and what you're here for. And then yes, things will be attracted to you.
Yeah, I can't get enough of the thought that so we know that matter cannot be created nor destroyed. We're all on
Yep.
the same page on that one. And it seems to me that the hologram that we're inside is just pixels that are on or off, right? The little light switch of And I even heard a quantum physicist describe the best way of describing matter is information. He's like you know what I mean? Because if you got one, that I'm gonna butcher it, but where you got two particles flying on different ends of the universe and you turn one and the other turns. Have you heard of that? There's
Mhm.
that quantum entanglement, I think it's called.
Yep.
So it just makes sense to me that, we're kind of in the simulation and we even make games. Now, here's the great hypocrisy of humanity, I feel like, and I probably misphrased that, but we have the opportunity to create video games where you just walk around in paradise. We can do that. We can build little universes where it's like, what did you do today? I woke up, I made love, I ate something that was delicious. I sat by the beach. I had, a couple like mocktails that are good for me, but also get me high. And then I went to bed, right? We could create that video game. No one's ever done it
Yeah,
because nobody's interested in that. Isn't that
that's right.
wild? We want the
That's right.
drama. It's like, teach me something, put me through some sort of harrowing journey.
Yeah, and I love this conversation that sometimes people talk about is contrast. Like everything's relative, right? So we wouldn't really know, and like what has us really appreciate those beautiful moments and those great times, whatever, are actually the challenges we've been through and the bad times, right? Because without that contrast, I don't think we would value it as much, right? Because anything that's constant. I mean, this is a very simple example, a deep concept, but they talk about how some guys, and it could be the other way around, but just like some guys bring their wives flowers every Friday, right? Well, if you bring your wife flowers every Friday forever, then the only thing that happens is the minute you miss a Friday, there's disappointment. But the flowers themselves every Friday sort of become pretty routine, right? But if you do something that's more thoughtful, where it's mixed up and it's whatever, and it's not the same thing, then it's more appreciated, right? Any kind of consistency at any level, just the human nature becomes not less interesting, right? So there's a power in contrast. Now, of course, when we're in the difficult times, sometimes we prefer, not to have as much contrast. Or I joke with people, I say, when you're conscious and you're working on, on yourself and developing and trying to figure out, your purpose and what you're here for and what you need to learn and the lessons, all that stuff. There are days when like you really say to yourself, can I just go back to being unconscious? Like, can I just take a break from this conscious stuff? Do I need to go to the next layer of the onion? Can I just please, but and you can't. I mean, you can do it, for maybe a few hours or a day where you take your mind off it. But when you're in a space of committing to growth, and ultimately, he's going to be looking. That's part of the journey. It's part of the game. What's the next lesson?
Yep. There's this guy whose name I can never remember, but he's an Instagram influencer, and he was the 37th Black Marine, I want to say, and he tells the story where they would go running, and all these other guys, they'd all be tired and their knees are shot and they're just dying, and they'd be getting towards the finish line. And then people getting excited. They're like, all right, here we go. Like, they're feeling it. And then some asshole instructor would just blow right past the finish line, just keep going. And then he'd start seeing heads dropping. People are dying, right? They're just like, and he says, they're living off the hope factor. He's like, I hope it rains. And he's like, I hope it hurts. Just leaning into the suffering. And I don't know, there's like that stoicism that is attractive to me. I like that sometimes where it's like, I hope it sucks. Like
Mhm.
I hope he fights me so I can, you know what I mean? So you can just, I don't know. Do you have any idea what I'm talking about?
No, I do, and it makes me think of like again, this is a minor example, but it shows the same thing, which is that like I used to cycle a lot, and yeah, I used to do like these century rides and these cross state ride, whatever, where we camp out, and I used to love the big hills, like the tougher the climb up was, and I'd be like, all right, I'm not getting off this bike. I'm not stopping. Right. Like there was something about that. And it sort of relates to my conversation prior about the contrast, because then you would get to the downhill on the other side and you really appreciate that downhill. Like, if somebody starts you at the top of the hill, if they drop you off in a helicopter or drive you up in a car or whatever, and you just do the downhill, okay, it may be pretty cool. You get to go fast on a bike, the wind's in your face, whatever. But after you've climbed for a couple hours up to that top, and then you get to hit that downhill, a whole different thing. So and some people the whole thing would be about getting to that downhill. For me, there was something that was beautiful while being painful about the climb itself as well. So
Yeah. So did you ever get into Alan Watts?
I know of him, but not deeply. Yeah.
He's like a contemporary of Ram Dass and Timothy Leary and all these like
Yep.
acid people in the 60s.
Yep.
And he was a Taoist, and he was one of the only like white Taoists, back in the day, because he actually went to the East and he did the training. He did the formal Zen training,
Yep.
where like don't move or we'll hit you with sticks. And it's so funny to listen to his take on it, because basically he's like, look, if you go sit at the foot of a master, you're asking to be hit by a stick. Was his
Right.
thing. He's like, eventually they'll just keep like having you come in day after day, and they'll tell you everything you do is wrong until you eventually muster up enough courage to be like, screw you, dude. Like, I don't care what you think anymore, stupid Zen master. Like, these cones are dumb. Like, I know who I am, and that's all they're trying to get you to do is
Right.
just like stand up for yourself. Like, what magical, mystical, universal knowledge do I have, as some Zen master that you don't have? It's inside of you, but I can't tell you that because you won't believe me. And so I'll just keep messing with you until you finally stand up for yourself, and then you'll
Right.
finally get it.
Right. And the key is you're standing up for yourself in that example, not from a place of reaction or ego, but from a place of having done that work to know who you are, to be able to say, this is it, right. Because there's a difference, right? It's fun. I talk about in my negotiating book how people often say that you got to be able to walk away from the deal, right? You got to be able to walk away. But there's a difference between walking away from a place of ego, upset, anger, reaction than it is from a place of clarity, when you know that, wait, this deal won't meet your objectives. It doesn't mean that, Kellen's a jerk or whatever. It just means that if, your objectives, my interests don't meet, it's a similar thing, right? What you're talking about is a situation where it's not somebody's like, oh, screw you, I know who I am, but it's from some place of ego. It's from that process where the Zen master has made you look at things over, reevaluate things, say, is this really, and then drops some things off, and then you get to the core of what is truly you, and then you can stand up for that from a place of clarity and from a place of internal alignment, as opposed to from a place of ego.
Yeah, I think one of the greatest gifts I was ever given was my dad dying when I was 2,
Mhm.
because my whole life is like I was raised Christian, and that whole like father who art in heaven vibe,
Mm.
for me was very literal and very
Right.
sort of like trying to wrap my head around it. And so sometimes people, by and large don't like confrontation, but as the leader of a company now, I will find various people, employees, clients, whomever, finally get to that point where they're ready to confront me. And I can literally feel just the anger and the anxiety and all that stuff just evaporate because they keep punching and there's nothing there.
Right.
There's nothing there, because it's like I'm like, do you see the connection between those two things? It's like I've like the suffering that I've been willing to endure and experience through multiple things through my whole life is nowhere near a conversation I'm going to have with someone. A conversation, really, a conversation, any conversation, it doesn't matter.
Right.
And talk about negotiation, same thing. This home that we just bought, they wanted 1,025,000, and then they dropped to half, and I was just like, no, million, like just appraisal, just fine, and I felt everything in my being. I'm like it's not going to hurt just to come back at 1 million, and they ended up calling our realtor and like giving him an earful because they were so upset that we wouldn't negotiate, and I was just like, oh, he's angry. I'm like, oh, anger. Oh, look, anger. Oh, wow, someone's angry. Like, what am I? Is I supposed to be afraid of the fact that someone's angry? Like, what is this nonsense? And they buckled. They completely buckled.
Well, and it's funny because you're without knowing it, you're talking about some of the fundamental principles of my negotiating book and what I teach people and what I do every day to negotiate for clients. I talked about clarity, right? The first one is clarity. What you're talking about is detachment, right? You had CDE, right? Clarity, that's my fundamental framework, detachment. You have the best negotiators are able to be detached to the outcome. You might have a preference. You wanted the house, that's your preference, right? You wouldn't be negotiating for it if you didn't, or discussing it if you didn't want it. But ultimately, you are attached to the outcome, right? And every whether it's in negotiation, whether it's major business decisions, any kind of interaction, whatever, if you could be detached, the Buddhists call it unattached. They look at detached as not caring, but I don't mean it that way. I mean in the way of, not that you don't care, but that you're not emotionally invested. You're not like, if it's going to happen, it'll happen. Yes, you take the actions. You don't sit back. It's not like, oh, whatever. But at the same time, you ultimately know that if it's meant to be and it's right and it's on the right terms that you got clear on, then it'll happen. And if it's not, then it's not meant to be. And you trust the universe that, well, okay, maybe there's another house that'll come along, or, later we'll get this house, or maybe I'm not meant to get a house right now. It's all good. So, that's a crucial thing. And that's one of the hardest ones, right? People get lazy and they don't do the work on clarity, especially the internal clarity, because I don't even really talk, there's external research, but there's internal clarity on what you really want. But then the detachment piece is really hard for folks. They get triggered. And then, just to finish it out, the E is equilibrium, just how you maintain that detachment and that clarity in the negotiation and don't get thrown off. So, I don't want to go too deep into that, but I think this thing applies in every situation, right? Like it's how do we keep our clarity? How do we remain detached, right? Trust, that what we're being drawn to or led to, whether it's in a negotiation or a relationship or a business or whatever it is. And then how do we stay in that equilibrium state so that we can keep that clarity and detachment? Like if we're able to do that, that's gets us, that's a big jump on life, because it's so easy. Because the flip side of that is what you're talking about. There's emotion, right? Like I talk about the 7 reasons negotiations fail. And again, you can apply this to any part of life. They're all emotional, right? Their fear, their anger, their rigidity, their, all that kind of stuff. I mean, emotion should be a signal to us. It should be information, right? We're not robots, right? But when we're as opposed to having them be information that we didn't take in and be part of the equation, when they control us is when we run into trouble.
Yeah. Again, so I find that the conversations that I have with many guests on this show become spiritual, in quotes, for lack of a better word,
Yep.
psychological. Some people prefer that term, emotional. But that's it, man. Like in entrepreneurship, that's how it goes. And I want to talk about attachment for a second. Something I've been studying for years and years and years. Kobe Bryant scored his first 60 plus point game by recognizing that all his opponents, he was 8. All of his opponents were attached to their right dribbling arm. They couldn't dribble with their left arm, right? So they're attached to this, right? Because they just they didn't have that flexibility. And so he would just force them to go left and take the ball from them because they didn't know what they were doing. So there's a philosophy called Wu Wei, which you may or may not be familiar with in Chinese culture, which is non-doing, but it's sometimes translated as no preference. So like if you look at the shot, what would you call it, graph of where any like high level NBA player shoots from, LeBron, Curry, whatever, it's equal left and right. It doesn't matter. And so it becomes, oh, you're leaning to the right, I'll go left. Oh, you overcompensated left, I'll go right. It doesn't make no difference. It's like you do whatever you're going to do. I'm not attached to, like, I'm going to get, and that's where people get all tripped up. It's like, I'm still trying to score a basket. Oh, but you're attached to the basket. It's like, no. Just hear me out. I'm trying, you're attached to the left and right. I'm not. That's why I get the thing I want.
100%. Yeah. And it's interesting because I think you're right. I mean, so that's a conversation you could have on an intellectual level, right? You can understand that intellectually, and it may not do anything for you, right? There's a lot of information we all understand, but we don't. We understand. Most of us understand what we should be eating and how we should be exercising, or whatever. A lot of us don't do it, right? Including me at some level, right? Um, so the point is that information is one thing, right? But then when you get to embody it, right, and that takes this internal body of work we've been talking about with everything else, right? To embody it. I mean, just the concept that you could either go left or right, for Kobe or LeBron or any of these guys, whatever. I mean, I'm sure, every other NBA player and coach, whatever, has told all the other guys that, but not all of them do it, right? Why? Because it takes a body of work, and not everybody's willing to do that work. Now that work could be spending hours and hours dribbling with your left hand, but there's also, again, this internal body of work that needs to be done, which is why, yeah, I mean, I agree with you. A lot of us, for me, it ultimately, I'm not a very organized religion person, but for me, it ultimately comes down to a spiritual level, right? For me, that's the level that everything comes down to, and it looks different for everybody. I've got no judgment about how people do it, but in order to do that deep work, to get connected to that inner truth, and I happen to believe our inner truth is connected actually to a greater truth, right? For me, that's part of the conversation of spirituality, whether you call it consciousness, whatever you want to call it. So when we're at our best, not only for ourselves, but for our families, communities, to have the most positive impact we can have, when we get to our inner truth and we get the connection between the alignment of that inner truth with what I call think is the universal truth, right? So for me, that's a spiritual conversation ultimately.
I know, it's so wild. It is so wild because it seems, at least as a child, I'm like, oh, well, you want to, hustle. It's all about the hustle and the grind and this and that. And it's like, it is all for me, it is all about relationships. My relationship with you, my relationship with myself, the relationship around the people that bug me and drive me crazy. I most recently got to a point where I finally like shed. It took me forever to do this, but I finally started to shed like positivity, if that makes
Mm,
any sense,
mm,
because I know at the very bottom of the core of my being that I do want everyone to thrive.
mm,
I want what I do legitimately want what is best for you listening audience member, for Corey, for me, for my kids in the other room listening watching their YouTube videos. I want what's best for everyone and I know that. That's
yeah,
just it is what it is, okay? And so I can tell someone when they're doing something that's irritating me. I'm okay with that now. It took me a long time to get there. Be like, that's bugging me. Please stop doing that. Right. Because then I give them an opportunity to be nice to me. Because when they didn't realize it was irritating me, there's nothing they can really do. They don't want to. And then I'm lashing out in weird ways later because I'm all frustrated.
right.
And I wasn't respecting myself enough to be like letting people know how I would like them to behave, which sounds like a total egocentric, like even saying it out loud makes me cringe. But the atmosphere in my home and my business has gotten so much better because we clear the air on stuff as opposed to just sit there and resent it.
Yeah, listen, no question. Expressing, and Kellen, just for the audience, I know what you're not talking about is being controlling or having every little thing have to be your way. What you're talking about is getting clear on and it's not that many things, right? On the limited number of things that you need, right, to be able to be the best you, to be able to function in a way that not only serves you but serves your family and community and whatever, right? And when we get clear on what those non-negotiables are, yeah, people who don't know us might have judgments about that, right? And that's okay, right? I mean, again, that comes down to the detachment, unattachment conversation, right? Like I don't, I won't say I never do because I'm still working on it, but I am way better at not letting other people's opinions, right, affect me. I take them in as information. Sometimes they have good insight for me. Great, I'll grow from that. But for the most part, I'm clear on who I am, and I'm clear on what those non-negotiables are and what works for me, and I'm more willing to express those. I think those of us who are on that spiritual journey, that personal growth journey, whatever you want to call it, we all get to that point where we're more willing to stand for that because we recognize that not only is that good for us, but it's actually good for everybody around us, even on a macro level, even though on a micro level at times it may not show up that way or may cause some tension, but that's okay. Then you deal with the tension and you get through it.
Yeah, I keep watching, and if you got to go, let me know because I'm running over just because it's fun.
It's all good.
So Magnus Carlsen, world chess champion right
Yep.
now. Like you get to the higher levels of chess, and there are the like beginners immediately resolve tension because
Yeah.
that's the most base impulse of like amateur, whatever the word is to describe it. Because those two pawns can capture, just capture them. Like the bishop can take the knight, so just take it. You look at these high level games, and there's so much tension on the
Yeah.
board. Like it is just about to explode, and the complexity gets just insane because when you capture, it's just a draw. That's usually what happens. Like you'll end in a draw, and it's very, and you can see that like 10 moves into most chess games. And so I've had to learn that, and then taking it back to martial arts, very, very similar too. It's all about this tension that builds up. Like you're grappling, and there's tension, and then it finally breaks because someone makes a mistake.
Yeah. Yeah, but you're right. Most people aren't willing to live in that tension. Most people aren't willing to live in uncertainty for more than a moment, right? And that ability to do that ability to live in that tension, live with the uncertainty, not have things immediately resolve. And I think that's been true for humans forever. And we want to add in now where there's so many things that are so instant that it trains us to want to get against instant gratification. I think it becomes even more difficult. And that's where, a lot of inner strength and discipline, comes in to be able to, and I think you're right. I think the chess example is a great example. And I think it's true. I think if you listen, I love people. I'll watch, even if it's not something I'm otherwise interested in. When I see somebody who has mastery in anything, I'm fascinated by it. Right. And you could tell there's something about mastery, right? Like occasionally I'll see a video online or somebody will turn me on to something, whatever. And it's like, whatever. I'm trying to think of an example, but it's not like anything I would otherwise be interested in. But this person has mastery in that. Okay. Whether it's bouncing a golf ball off their, like Tiger Woods used to do, whatever, like off their club, or it's, like even little stupid stuff like that. And I'm fascinated by it because I'm fascinated by the conversation of mastery, right? And nobody achieves mastery without being willing to be in that tension, being willing to be in that uncertainty, being willing to get. Somebody told me something which I stuck with me for years. We get to a stage where things are going really well, and sometimes we'll get bored. And as an entrepreneur, it's very common to, when you get bored, go over and do this other thing. Somebody said to me, consider the fact that boredom is the stage immediately before mastery. And I was like, whoa, like I still get chills when
I love that.
Right?
Yeah,
like just
because
that concept to think that boredom is the stage right before mastery.
Yeah, it's like it would be the perfect satanic ploy to be like, I've tried everything else, right? I'm this horrible little demon who's like, I don't want him to be good at this, and so I'm gonna try every little thing. I'm gonna make it hard. I'm gonna make it difficult. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna put these obstacles in his way. He keeps overcoming them. Here's the one last trick up my sleeve. I'm gonna make him bored, bored of this stupid shit. He doesn't want to do it anymore. He's done it enough. What's the point? It's boring. That's great.
Yeah.
That's a great way to end this thing too. So my son just opened the door, he peeked through. I'm like, 5 minutes, buddy. So we got to wrap it up. So I got to figure out what he needs. But yeah, like I said at the start of the show, no coincidences. You never know. If you're open to it, ladies and gentlemen, make sure that the conversations that you're having in your life, that you are open to them going in super cool, profound, deep places, because you will be shocked. You will be shocked by the quality of conversations that you can have with other human beings if you're just willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. You know what I mean? Give them the benefit of the doubt. Assume that they're super wise, right? Assume that they have incredible insight, and then voila, incredible insight and wisdom comes pouring out. And that's how it goes, ladies and gentlemen. So I want to make sure that our good friend Corey has a chance to let us know where we should go to spend more time with him. Corey, how do the fine folks do that?
The easiest thing is the hub website is CoreyKupfer.com. That's CoreyKupfer.com. I have kupferlaw.com for the law firm or whatever, but if you go to CoreyKupfer.com, you can get to the law firm, you can get to the book, you can get to my Deal Quest podcast, you can get to my social media content. So CoreyKupfer.com.
That's Corey Kupfer, Kupfer. I'll send you an invoice for the jingle.
The jingle. There we go.
Kupfer. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for swinging by the show. You know the drill. YouTube.com/Send It Rising. If you want to see me barefoot longboarding, that's TikTok.com/Send It Rising, delivering social media news of the day you know you want to. Special shout out to our good friend, Mr. Kupfer. Thanks for being on the show today. We appreciate it.
Great being here, Gillen. I had a lot of fun.
All right. Thanks, Corey.